All right, everybody. Thanks for showing up to the Toxic Man podcast. This is episode number 12. I'm John with the Toxic Man. We believe in traditional masculinity and real manliness. No soy boys. If you want to transition over to be a real man, we're cool with that. If you're a soy boy. But other than that, we believe in traditional masculinity and the way manliness was meant to be. I want to thank Toxic Masculinity Whiskey by Firebrand Spirits. They are our official sponsor now. And as their motto goes, tastefully smooth and unapologetically strong like you. So today, I want to talk a little bit about veterans in the military and getting back in society. My brother went overseas. He was in Iraq for about 18 or so months and saw some combat. And when he came back, he had to readjust. I mean, you get jetted across the Atlantic. You're in a war zone for, a year and a half, and you get jetted right back across because he was in Hawaii over at Schofield Barracks. And then you're right back into society. So it's obviously a tough thing to have to do. I can't imagine having to do it. And, to try and survive, be on edge for all that time, and then come back and just kind of come back to an even normal keel. It can't be easy. So today I have a guest I'm glad to have, because I know sometimes I'm sure the solo podcast can get kind of dry for you, and I try to keep them as lively as possible. So it's good to have guests on. But today I have Angie with me, and she does some counseling with veterans. So I'm going to let her tell y'all what she does. Obviously, I can't do as good as she does. So, Angie, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, I guess a good way to start is just tell us a little bit about what you do for veterans.
It's multifaceted, so there's a lot of parts to it. Some just need counseling to reintegrate into society. Some who have never even been into combat or saw combat, but being in the military is such a different life compared to regular society. So it takes a while to get back in there. But the combat stress disorder, it's just a natural reaction to trauma. Guys come back with it. They assume they already have PTSD. But if it can be nipped in the butt the moment they come back, the moment it happens, then it won't develop into those things like, post-traumatic stress disorder, which comes with all manner of problems. And that's pretty much it. I volunteer in my off time because I have no social life, and I keep a group of Marines in line, and that's about it for me.
Okay. So when you say you nip it in the butt before it gets going, how do you do that?
The bad thing is that the military instills in its soldiers, its Marines, that to closet your emotions, because if you're thinking emotionally, then you're going to get hurt. You're going to hurt somebody else. You can't react emotionally. You have to react with your training. So emotions kind of trained out of them. And the bad thing is that now it's not only trained out of them, it's also socially kind of taken out of them. Men don't have emotions. And I'm not talking about sitting on the corner crying because you're, like you said, tofu, like your bowl of tofu fell on the ground. I'm saying, real actual emotions about loved ones and traumatic experiences. We have to get that stuff out. It's like an infection. If you can't just ignore it. Mm-hmm. The hardest part is getting them in there. That's the hardest part, because admitting that something is wrong with them is weak, and they don't want to admit that. And they don't want anyone to look down on them, and they feel like they've failed. And that's the hardest part, is getting them in there. Most will start once they realize there's a problem, but then they stop. It's actually so normalized that they stop and then restart later when things get worse, that people actually set schedules by it, because we know it's going to happen. That's the hardest part. Get y'all to cry.
It's almost like clockwork then.
It is, and that's the sad part, because you can become very jaded to it. Like, oh, this is happening, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I don't I like to say that I'm a non-professional professional, because once I get in there, if I just speak to them like exactly how they're worried, I'm going to speak to them. How's your relationship with your mom? Were you hugged enough? Things like that. They're going to check out. They're not going to. But if I'm in there cussing like a sailor and getting them to tell war stories and getting them to laugh, it naturally transgresses to the tough stuff. And that's the hardest part, is getting them to talk about that stuff, because they want to block it. They don't want to feel it. They've been taught not to feel it. So making them feel it is.
So you think
sorry.
I would say, so they kind of come in already with the walls up?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. They want no part of it. They're there because they have to be there.
So that's hard. Yeah, that must be really difficult to get through to somebody who's already battle hardened, so to speak, emotionally. And then they're already pissed off about having to go.
Yep.
I would say it takes a lot of skill.
It took a lot of practice. Yeah. It took a lot of getting to know them first, because I didn't want to go into it. Once I realized that that's what I wanted to do, I didn't want to go into it like I had experienced. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and they seemed so cold and detached, and you're telling the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your whole life, and you wonder if they're thinking about what they're having for lunch that day. And I didn't want to be that kind of person. Nobody wants to talk to that counselor. And so, yeah, I decided that at first I have to feel them out, and if they're okay with, just pretty much, pardon my language, it's a bullshit session. No different than sitting around a campfire with your buddies. That's what I try to make it feel like, because that's when you're going to get people talking.
Because that brings a level of comfort to them. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more, I guess, personal based than clinical based.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they like the fact that if they're telling a story and they say something like, so we had to go back to the fob and blah blah blah, and I don't have to pause them and be like, what's a fob? And so knowing that stuff kind of makes them more comfortable with me, because initially you have a combat hardened person coming in, and they see not only a female, but they see a civilian. And most of them kept those stories, those experiences from all the women in their lives, because they didn't want to tell them. They don't want to admit that stuff. Some of it they're ashamed of, because people just don't understand. Outside the war zone, things are different, very vastly different.
Oh yeah.
Things that are funny in a war zone, not so funny in America. But stuff like that, just getting past that and helping them understand that I have the dark humor too. Let's talk about it.
It's very hard to connect with people. If you're, I think, in law enforcement or fire service or military, you tend to get a twisted sense of humor because of what you see. And it gets kind of dark. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but you use it as a coping mechanism. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy from all of the bad things that you see and experience.
Out there, humor is kind of the only coping mechanism they have, because it's the only coping mechanism they're allowed to have. It's you can't go to your hooch and cry your eyes out. You just can't, because you're going to get all kinds of crap for that. So you make horrible jokes about horrible things, and God help me, they're funny. But because I've developed that sense of humor too, and so now it's because you've probably seen on Veteran sites and stuff, people talking about it's hard to go to a family dinner because you're going to ruin it if you tell a joke. Everybody's going to stare at you. Nobody's going to understand. And they all get treated differently too. Like they're a new species. Once they come back, people just expect them to turn it off and be themselves again. And it just doesn't work that way. And then right there's another support system that's gone for them.
Yeah, because when your family doesn't understand you at that point, who else is going to understand you? Because those need to be the ones that you go to that should be able to understand what's going on, kind of how you're feeling. And then you're like, well, they don't understand me. I can't go to a stranger, because they don't even know who I am.
And that's they become, and since we're exclusively talking about men, I'm going to be saying man because I don't want anybody getting mad because I'm not saying women because I know there are women there too. But the problem is it's almost exclusively male. Suicide in the military is almost exclusively male.
And what do you think contributes to that?
All of the factors we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also the difference between civilian society and military society, where it's building up masculinity, is that instead of being an individual, you're no longer a specialized individual. You are part of a group. If that group fails, you are the failure.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not cohesion, there's nothing. And they have to, and I'm not saying these things like they're bad things. I don't want anybody to think that, because these are things they have to do to survive. It's
right.
basic.
Yeah.
Feelings don't factor when you're doing this. They can't. What contributes to it is if anything goes wrong, they've now failed the unit. They failed their guys. They failed their buddies. It depends on who are there. They failed America. And they hold that on their shoulders. And then when they leave, they come back, and finding jobs are very hard, very hard. Because everybody assumes, well, you've been in the military, they taught you a skill, you can use that skill in the job market. There's no job market for an infantryman. Nobody wants you to work at Walmart so you can kill everyone. They lose that financial stability. Depending on, they have TRICARE for so long after that, but then they can lose, if they don't have disabilities, they can lose their insurance, which then takes away their ability to go get help if they would have in the first place. They feel like after that, they have failed their family. They failed their wife, their kids, everyone. They're the failure. And then suicide starts to become almost like an altruistic thing. They think they're helping the situation. If they take themselves out of the situation, it will get better because they're the problem. They start bringing that unit cohesion home with them. And instead of seeking help, they just think they're a problem to be dealt with.
That's what yeah. So they still have that group team mentality, and they can't go back into individualism.
It's very difficult because it all breaks down to science. When they go into boot camp, when they go into basic training, they're not just being physically broken down and built back up, they're being mentally broken down and built back up. And they've changed their entire way of thinking, because society raises us all. Our parents do, but society raises us all. And we're taught how to be, how to act, who we are. Now you've taken away that person's self-identity and then telling them that you are part of this group, this is who you are. But then they go home without being deprogrammed, and it just stays with them. And most of them, it stays with them their whole lives. And you have that group mentality, it just happens.
No, that's really compelling. I've never really thought of it that way. And that's kind of why I thought this would be a good interview, to have someone on here that talks about that. Cause that's pretty deep. That I've never really thought about the programming that goes into it, then having to deprogram out of it. With the group team mentality is great for war, but it's not good for home.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the problems that, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's the brotherhood part of it too, because what's acceptable in a battlefield or even in just active duty thing, they go out in the field. I don't know if you've ever heard of nuts butt.
Yeah.
Cuddling. They cuddle.
Yeah.
That's how close they are. That's how close they are. They 24/7, you're with these guys. You're dirty, you're cold, you're miserable, but they're there. Mm-hmm. And then once you leave, they're scattered. And males can't really, in normal society, have friendships like that, because what are they going to get called? What's going to be said?
Yeah.
So it's like they lose that closeness and they miss it.
The brotherhood is extremely important because it's part of survival. I mean, even as simple as I've heard of, for instance, law enforcement officers that say there's 2 or 3 guys and they end up in a shooting or some sort of stressful situation where that goes on. So you have So they 2 or 3 show up at a bank that's getting robbed, and they end up in a shootout and they kill the suspect. Well, they build a bond in that short time that no one else can really understand. Or maybe they even go to over a series. They're on a platoon together. They answer calls for a couple of years together, dangerous calls, maybe not shootings, but fights, stuff like that. They build a bond, not necessarily to the extent of war zone bond, but still you're in stressful situations where you're having to fight people and you're trying to help each other out on the streets. I guess it's sort of the same thing.
Nothing bands us closer together than being on the same side of a fight.
Oh yeah.
I mean, for anyone who's not in the military, I can give a civilian example. 9/11. 9/11 happened. Now, everyone knows that New York is notorious for people being rude. It's loud. It's obnoxious. It's just, after 9/11, horns went silent. Horns went silent. People were nicer. People were kind to each other. They were on the same side of the fight. They were all banded together by a tragedy, by a trauma, and it made them tighter. It made them closer. Sadly, it was only for a short amount of time, but that's the way it works. We're all in this together, and so everybody banded together. It didn't matter, man, woman, black, white. We were Americans at that moment, and we were all brothers and sisters, and that's what it's like. It's that moment.
Yeah, it's the stressful moments that can really build a bond that no one really ever understands.
And like I said, I listened to your podcast. There was because I do agree with like most of your points. The only one that I don't agree with, and this is coming from a woman who this is going to be so non-politically correct, but I grew up in an area where men wear camouflage. They wear Carhartt. They go hunting, they kill deer, they four-wheel, it's mudding, it's country. And so I've been around manly men, and that's what I was used to. And so that's coming from me. But instilling in men and our sons that it's never okay to show emotion is really kind of setting them up for failure. Because then when something really bad happens, they internalize it. And this is what's happening to the soldiers and Marines. And I say soldiers and Marines because they're the most likely to be in combat. Sorry, Air Force and Coast Guard and the Navy, but y'all.
Strike. Yeah, they strike from a
kidding.
distance.
I'm totally kidding. But they're preached to their entire lives that showing any emotion or being tender at any moment is weak, and it's not manly, and it's not masculine. But actually, in all honesty, some of the toughest men I know are also the biggest, softest guys I know. My special forces buddy loves kittens. Like his whole feed, you'd never know he was in the military. It's just of kittens, and it's adorable, and somehow it makes them scarier when they're like that, I think. But masculinity comes in so many different ways. And,
it does.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly what I said in a podcast that you heard. I know I've put, and I got 2 daughters, and I am super soft with them, and I do get emotional with them. But I guess I could clear it up now since it was brought up, and so I think there's a time and a place for
yeah,
people. I think that's more of what it is. And I know I've made memes and stuff where men can be emotional. And I may not have portrayed in which podcast you were listening to. I'm not sure, but I guess just to clarify it, there's a time and a place for a man to be emotional, and a time and a place where they don't need to be emotional.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, not in your skinny jeans sitting there crying because you dropped your ice cream. It's just, it's instilling in it's like it's okay to be emotional. Because I even taught my daughter. I have a son and a daughter. Don't be a crybaby. Knock it off.
Right.
Not everything is like that. But I was the same with both. But I also wanted my son to be able to talk about things if he needed to.
Right.
And if things were bothering him. I think the only time he ever came to me with something that I was like, really, was when Cortana died in Halo? Oh, he was so upset. But other than that,
It's just, yeah. And that's, yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because that just means that the messaging on my end needs to be a little bit more clear. And that's good to know that I need to be a little more clear with it. So I'll make sure to do that. I don't think guys need to withhold emotions 100% of the time, because at the end of the day, we're still humans, just like females are. And I'm very soft with my wife. I'm very soft with my two daughters, and they really were a big change in that. And I always wanted boys, but I think God gave me girls because He knew I needed to soften up a little bit, and that's okay. So
I think on their teenagers.
Oh gosh, yeah, that I dread.
My daughter's 16, so
I figured the older one's 8. I'm sure in probably about 5 years she'll really start to hate me. At that point, I'll have to get a second job or something, so I'm away from the house more. Maybe that'll save our relationship. I don't know, but yeah, that's a lot of good information on the things that the guys and women go through. The combat zones make it a lot worse, I'm sure, than the ones that, aren't necessarily deployed. Maybe they have stateside jobs. It makes things harder when you've seen the death, the gore. There was a special, I think it was on Prime, that my wife and I watched. It was called The Hornet's Nest. Have you seen that?
I have not seen The Hornet's Nest.
It's really good. It's about earlier, I think it's the peak of the Afghan war. There's a father and son, I think CBS war correspondents, get embedded into a unit. And I don't remember how long they were with them, but they're with them, and there's a pretty big firefight in it, and a couple of the guys get killed. There's some wounded. And it was really interesting to see, because these guys are in a firefight, a couple of their guys get killed, and hours later they're sitting there eating MREs. Stone cold. And you have to do that to survive. It's just part of it. And
I actually think I might have seen that. Did he take his son with him eventually, the reporter?
Yeah, they went together.
Yep, I remember.
Yeah. So it's just that's one thing that struck me, was like, man, these guys were just in a firefight, and they're just casually talking about, yeah, so-and-so got killed. And it's just like eating away. But I understand, like, that's what you have to do. And it's for survival, but it's to survive the danger, but it's still dangerous at the same time. If that makes sense.
The things that become normal life over there are insane. It's amazing what we can adapt to as humans. We can adapt to almost anything.
Truly is.
And because there's also one called Only the Dead, and it's an Australian embedded with some, I think, Marines or the Army, but it was an Al-Ramadi during 2005, and I watched it because that's what got me started in all of this. My friends left and went to Iraq in 2005. He did route clearance for the 1st and 2nd Marine Division of Al-Ramadi, which was in the Triangle Death, and it was bad. It was a very bad place. And I talked to them every night. I'm an insomniac. 3 a.m. is around lunchtime in Iraq, so we would all interact. But that's when I started to learn about how they were adapting, and it was just so cold about it, because they would get mortared. And because of operational security, we could not talk about the fact that they were being mortared. But I knew, because he'd be on camera, and he would get up and leave and come back, and he'd be in Kevlar. And we'd continue our conversation like nothing was happening. And they played poker through mortar attacks. And then one night there was a mortar attack, and there was a blackout, and we lost 2 guys. And it came back on talking about Farmville. These were the Farmville days. And what he planted. And it's crazy. It's coming back from route clearance and being upset because the IED delayed them, and his strawberries withered in the field. But
it's how he coped.
Although it was strawberries. Yeah, strawberries grew in 4 hours. Why would you do that before a mission? But I'm not one to judge. But yeah, it got down to that. And then after that, he wasn't comfortable with showing me gore or telling me the stories, but the other guys were. And so I knew what was going on. And that's when I started adapting to it, because even just seeing those pictures and knowing that in real time, this is what I'm watching, was traumatic. And I had to learn to get over looking at gore and horrible things, and because I was eventually going to listen to these stories, and I couldn't sit there bawling and listen to them. That was the hardest part to get over, because I would always want to cry. So I can't think of my friends and listen to these stories, because I will correlate the two, and I'd be a sobbing mess. I wouldn't be helping anybody.
Yeah, it's almost like they have to survive over there and then come back home only to survive again. But in a different way.
It's hard, because I look at, like I spoke about my special forces friend. Now, if you go by what movies say, he was going to come home and be special security for a top executive or a private investigator, something like that. He's cooked.
Yeah.
Special forces trained, learned how to speak. They teach them languages so fast that they'll forget English a little bit. But he learned Serbo-Croatian in like 2 weeks, and now the man cooks. And a lot of people look down on that. They come back from combat situations. There are guys who were infantry who did amazing things, and now they work at Jiffy Lube. And that's the hard part for everybody to accept and everybody to understand. And then it also, like I said, they can come back to financial situations, relationship. Oh, nothing hurts a marriage or a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship like deployment. Nothing.
Yeah. I think, my brother was, I think, engaged, but that didn't last long while he was over there.
There's a reason they talk about Jody all the time.
Jody's got your girl.
Jody got your girl.
Yep. At this point, we'll transition over to our other segments that we do. We'll do on this one. We'll do the Feminist Freakout Award. All right. So this is going to be the Feminist Freakout segment. And this one is going to be about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who used to be the Trump secretary, press secretary. There we go. It's from a left-wing website called Jezebel. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it at all. So, okay. So you're familiar with Jezebel.
I'm familiar with a lot of the sites. I'm a reader, so I look at everything. So
no, I'm sure you could tell we're pretty right-leaning conservative, but I like to read the Washington Post and the New York Times and Jezebel and all those, the Atlantic, just because they give you a pretty good idea about how that side thinks. And I think to debate the people, you need to know the most about them. Mm-hmm. So this one says, former White House press secretary Sarah Sanders made her debut as a Fox News contributor today, using her cameo on Fox and Friends to tell Americans that the economy is amazing, actually to promote her book and talk about how mean women are to her. This is obviously a bit of an older, this is actually from September 2019, so it's not too old. But so Sarah Sanders goes on to kind of talk about how while she goes out to eat, still she gets harassed by certain people who don't believe what she believes politically. And what I like to point out here is that how if you're conservative female, how it seems like you get kind of discriminated against by other, like maybe left-leaning females. I mean, do you see that any correlation there?
I do. On my Facebook, I would like to say I'm not complete. I'm in the middle.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I'm in the middle. Because I see a lot of things from both sides. That if we could all just get along, but
yeah.
But yeah, I post things about guns, the Second Amendment, or my opinion on issues, and I will get blowback from the females on my list. I don't have a lot of close female friends, and that's not by choosing. It just happened. I grew up with a brother and a cousin who are my best friends, and and it just kind of just kept on from there. All my guy friends and all my friends in high school are guys, and as I grew up, I just was more interested in the stuff that they do and the stuff that they like. You know, I wanted to go shooting and four-wheeling and fires and that stuff, camping, and my chick friends were just, I don't know, I got put down for it, and yeah, so yeah, and a lot of women, and this is going to be kind of odd. I don't know if men know this, but women who associate with that stuff, women who are kind of who lean that way, are also looked down on other women as like I didn't know what the word for it, sluts. Like they just do it so they can be around men and be with men, and so you're getting it from both sides. You're not fitting in with their beliefs, and then also now that's got to be the only reason you're doing it, and so
they don't take anything else into effect. Like that's maybe just your upbringing. Maybe you're just like you said earlier. You were always around manly men who hunt, fish, outdoors, you know, slinging mud from vehicles and wheels and all that good stuff. I mean, maybe you just like that.
Shooting people, blowing stuff up.
Little, you know.
Who doesn't like that? I never understood.
Yeah, but I think to label a woman as a slut just because she wants to go do those things, and it's more of a man-dominated thing, it's a little ridiculous.
Happens a lot.
Apparently so. So it looks like, you know, the left is kind of freaking out a little bit about Sarah Sanders. I'm sure if she was never Trump's press secretary, they wouldn't care less about her being a Fox News contributor now and having a book. That wouldn't bother them at all. So it just kind of shows that, you know, I think we discussed it a little bit earlier, how how I said when feminism first started with women's suffrage, that was a great thing. Women needed the opportunity to vote, you know, opportunity to go out here and get the job that they want to get. But it's only selective now. It's not for all women. It's just for feminism is for a select few that only believe in a certain voting way, a certain voter block. They get the feminist benefits, but the rest, you know, they get hassled and harassed. So it kind of makes you wonder if it's really just been watered down in such a way now that's just not even truly effective or beneficial for women. It's
been boiled down to ridiculousness.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get taken seriously by marching around with a vagina hat on.
Yeah, you don't. That's exactly what my wife says.
You don't.
No, you don't. You don't. I mean, no different than if, you know, a bunch of guys went to Washington, D.C. and put a bunch of penis hats on and ran around. Mm-hmm. It'd be like a bunch of fools, and they'd be ridiculed for doing that, rightfully so.
Actually, I'd like to see that, but still.
Oh, it'd be funny to see for sure, but
there's not as much flopping with the vagina hat. I just like to put that out there. It'd be funnier.
There's that humor you're talking about coming out.
The inappropriate. I'm sorry. Yeah. And I will readily admit that I don't know if it was resting bitch face that made me not like her, but I believe that everybody is allowed to their own opinion or their own political affiliation. You shouldn't be harassed when you go to dinner because people recognize you for that.
Right.
Unless, you know, you're Hitler.
Well,
it's over with. It's done with. Let it go. I do believe that, you know, women do need a voice because there are still some aspects we're not really progressing on. But like I said, marching around in vagina hats and stupid chants and fights, it just makes us look stupid. It makes us look stupid.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all.
It makes us look like fragile, easily offended. You know, it makes us look worse than what they're undoing what they think they're doing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So from here, we normally move over to the Toxic Man Award segment of our show. So here comes the Toxic Man Award. All right. So this one comes out of Cape Coral, Florida. A Lyft driver was given a ride, and while he was giving a ride to somebody, the guy started acting a little erratic. It says a Cape Coral, Florida driver for the rideshare company Lyft uses legally owned and carried firearms to defend himself when a passenger pulled a knife and began threatening him. According to WINK, I guess Wink TV, the driver didn't have to pull the trigger, but the fact that he had a gun may have saved his life. So, in short, while the guy gets in the car, this assailant, I guess you could say, he ends up pulling a knife out and demanding to, or he gives demands for the driver to go to certain places. Well, eventually the driver got tired of being told where to go and pulls his gun out and kicks him out of the car. He got back to his company, Lyft, and Lyft decided that they wanted to possibly fire him over this. So I guess it brings me to the point where, obviously a private company with their own policies, they can do what they like. But sometimes it seems like almost companies are so worried about liability, but they're not worried about their employees. And it makes you wonder sometimes, how much do they really care about their employees over the liability? I just kind of a pet peeve of mine, but I give this man the award for standing up for himself and saying, my safety matters a little bit more than the policy of Lyft. If they fire me, they fire me. So what? I mean, I think that to risk getting fired from your job for your own life says a lot, because some people are just like, okay, well, I'm more worried about the money. I got to get paid, And
he deserves an award for carrying in the first place.
Absolutely.
Because taking responsibility to protect himself. Cab drivers, that's a dangerous job, and they should carry something. That's I don't use Lyft. Now I know why. I do use Uber, and I do know the stance of the show on homosexuality, transgenderism, and stuff. But this made me very proud because Uber was going to show up. My driver's name is Christopher. When I got in, I met Christina. Christina was very nice. Christina was very sweet. Christina was packing a steak. I was so proud. Just, yes. Because usually I associate that stuff with far left, like uber liberalism and gun hating and stuff. But no, she was taking the initiative. She was going to protect herself if somebody was going to hurt her, and I fully endorse that.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. My wife is about 105 pounds, and when she goes out to the store with our daughters, she's little. She is little, and our kids are 8 and 4. I mean, if she doesn't carry, I get a little aggro that she's not carrying because she needs to. So
and yes, they're dangerous. I keep weapons. I was involved in a shooting accident. I have been shot, so I know it sucks. So if you can avoid it, everybody just do that.
Yeah. Don't get shot.
But and it was my own stupidity. When they say never let your guard down for a second, always do what you're supposed to do. The one time in my life I didn't practice weapon safety, I wore a 9mm bullet. So yeah, always do it.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
But I mean, you just have to take precautions and be careful, because there's a billion things in your house that can kill people. Mm-hmm. You just have to be careful. It's the same with weapons.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you don't endorse carrying or wearing a 9mm bullet. Is that what you're saying? No. Okay. Noted.
Yeah. It's the worst. That's the worst piercing I have ever had. I felt so stupid. Oh.
That is solid advice, though. We will take that advice for sure to the house.
Yeah. Don't get that piercing.
Okay. I'll try my best. So that pretty much wraps it up. I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate having
thank you.
Having a voice.
I apologize for rambling and just going off in 500 different directions. I have been nervous, and I didn't know this was going to be video. So, and I can't see my face, so this whole time I'm just like, oh, I hope my hair isn't all poofed out.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay. You didn't get it. The video linked up?
Oh yeah, it's linked up, but like the little thing is so small. All I see is my forehead. Because apparently I have a really big forehead.
I got you. Well, I'm gonna do a quick few shout outs. Actually, I forgot to do it. So Shane from Studio_933 does our sound effects and our music. I'm gonna give a shout out to him for his contribution. And then a shout out to our branders at Dip Branding 123, as well as Iron Covenant Gym here in South Carolina. If you're close by, go by and see Will. Tell him, you heard about Iron Covenant from us. And also FJ Stormtrooper. He's a buddy of mine, and he has an FJ. He's all into outdoors and taking his FJ Cruiser out and doing all kinds of neat pictures and slinging mud in it too. So that's going to be pretty much our show. And I thank you everybody for listening. If you made it this far, if you could stand it, I'm just kidding.
If you can put up with me.
So yeah, I really do appreciate you coming on though. And I would like to get you back sometime. Maybe we can go into maybe a little deeper topic. Maybe if you want to give it some thought, I'll give you a warning though. Maybe hit you up on a message and say, hey, maybe in a couple of weeks we can talk about something. You can kind of come up with something a little bit deeper. That means maybe something more to you.
Actually, this is my whole life. These guys are my whole life. I mean, when I'm not watching cartoons, but I mean, yeah, I didn't make it a vocation. I made it my life. And, cause you kind of have to be able to, you almost have to convince them that you were there. I don't lie or say that I was, but I have to say, I know that it's what it smells like. They've told me. I know I've never been there, but, and describe things, and it kind of makes them more comfortable. So that's my life.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that would have to be. You can't just turn that off. Not something like that. When you put so much effort and time into it, it's just not a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 thing.
Yep, and they become your friends, and then you're stuck with them.
Yeah.
Speaking of, can I say hi to someone too?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. First, hi Martin. Thank you, and hi Nick.
All right. Good. Well, thank you for coming on. Really do appreciate it. And that way it's just not as odd for me to talk to my kid's playroom window. I can actually talk to a person. So that's good.
All right.
Really do appreciate it. And I'll let you know. I'll send you a message when I get it all edited and ready to go and get it put up. And that
Alrighty.
way it usually goes on YouTube and some other platforms that we have. YouTube is probably the easiest because everyone has that accessibility to YouTube. Not everyone has Spotify or Stitcher or Podbean or what other places we put it. So, but I'll let you know. That way you can maybe listen to it if you want to.
All right, I'm gonna have to try some of that whiskey too.
Yeah, and
I'm a bourbon lover, but I'll try some rye.
You'll see it when it comes out. I'll do a whole nother video on that. So yeah, thank you again to Toxic Masculinity Whiskey by Firebrand Spirits for sponsoring the show. But next time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, John.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye.